I'm just going to introduce our awesome speakers, both of whom I've known for many years. First, Elizabeth Heredia. She's Capacity Building Senior Manager at REDF, where she partners with grantees and borrowers to provide technical assistance to strengthen their businesses and programs. She loves helping social enterprise leaders achieve their goals and learning from their creativity, empathy, and resilience along the way. Think of those words when you think of social innovation and social entrepreneurship: creativity, empathy, and resilience. Before REDF, Elizabeth was a manager at Bain & Company, where she worked with clients on projects ranging from customer experience and digital strategy to organizational transformation, that word of transformation, and investment due diligence. Before that, she worked for the Peace Corps on environmental and economic development initiatives. By the way, my do-over in my career is to do the Peace Corps, experience the Peace Corps, so very, very well done, in a rural Panamanian community. She has a BS in civil engineering and environmental engineering from Berkeley and an MBA from here, which is when I met Elizabeth when she took my class a number of years ago, and I could tell then that she was going to be a true impact leader and has proven just that in a relatively short period of time since her graduation from Anderson. So Tom Vozzo is a good friend and longtime colleague. I met him in 2011, just before he joined Homeboy Industries as its first CEO. I don't know if he's going to go into that story, but it was a great collaboration in him joining Homeboy. So I had the privilege of working with him and the Homeboy team ever since. He's spoken in my classes here, along with homies and homegirls from Homeboy Industries every year since I started teaching social entrepreneurship in 2012. Tom spent much of his career as a global business executive with a track record leading highly successful businesses in the service, retail, and distribution industries. He was known for growing businesses and exceeding earnings targets, even in challenging economic times. And his last corporate role was CEO of the $1.8 billion Aramark Uniform and Career Apparel Group. If you aren't familiar with Homeboy Industries, you certainly will become more familiar today. It's the largest, most successful gang rehabilitation and reentry program in the world. Founded over 30 years by Father Greg Boyle. Tom has led the organization for the last 11 years, bringing his business expertise and vision to implement a strategic and a mission-driven plan, which has resulted in a tripling of the size of the organization, which really doesn't matter unless it equates to a tripling or more of the impact of the organization. In 2020, Homeboy was awarded the prestigious Conrad and Hilton Humanitarian Prize for its humanitarian impact. It was a game changer and really changed Homeboy's place on the map. And finally, the organization started getting the recognition that it deserves on not just a local stage, but a national stage and a global stage. It's Tom's goal of working himself out of his current CEO role and getting out of the way. Something you can learn about in his book, The Homeboy Way, A Radical Approach to Business and Life. And I'm not pitching it just because it's a fantastic book and not because he mentions me many times in the book, but because it is a great book about a radical approach to business and life, the Homeboy story and Tom's journey as a successful business leader and social impact leader. So Tom is confident that the organizations, the homies and homegirls that are currently in the management team of the organization are going to rise up to continue to lead the organization and create a much more sustainable, diverse, and inclusive culture over time and lasting. So with that, I am very happy to turn this over to Elizabeth and to Tom Vozzo.
Good morning, Tom.
Oh, good morning.
I'm so happy to be here in conversation with you. And we're going to dig into much of what Gail mentioned. So I know we just heard a little bit about you. I think the first question I'd like to start with is, can you just tell us a little bit more about Homeboy Industries and your own journey to Homeboy?
Yeah, sure. But boy, I'll get there. And I'll do that first. I do want to comment on the Dean's comments because it made me think about a couple things along the way. What impact is really about. But I'll start with for sure the question. So Homeboy Industries, as Gail mentioned, we're a nonprofit organization, human services organization. We work with formerly incarcerated individuals who've been part of gangs. So our core competency is helping people get out of gang life, helping men and women leave that life behind. When they come out of the prison system, the jail system, they got two choices: go back running with the gang. But really what they want to do is leave that behind. They just don't know how. And when they walk through our doors at Homeboy Industries, we help them. It started 35 years ago by our founder, who's still with us, thankfully, Father Greg Boyle, Jesuit priest. His first stop as a Jesuit priest was at Dolores Mission, the poorest parish in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And as many of you know, Los Angeles is the gang capital of the country, unfortunately. And back in the 90s, there was an epidemic of gang violence, and Greg was seeing these young men just lose their life to the gang world, and they wanted to come up with something different. And so we hit upon this simple notion that if you can get them a job where they can earn enough money for food and shelter, they're not going to go turn to the gang to earn that money for food and shelter. So that's how Homeboy Industries started. Started as a jobs program, morphed into having businesses, realizing that they can hire more people and control the environment better. And then, but over time though, and as it's grown, it's not just about jobs, it's about allowing people to heal from their trauma. So Homeboy Industries is really on the forefront of helping the most forgotten and demonized people in our society.
Yeah, it's a special place for sure. Tell us how you came to be at Homeboy.
Yeah, sure. So, as Gail mentioned in my bio, 26 years in the private sector. I was a corporate executive of a $13 billion corporation. I love business, and I did well through that business environment. And whenever I go to conferences, I still tell people I'm a committed capitalist, which these days doesn't sound so good to many audience, but I feel like I can say it here without these sneers along the way. But listen, I think well-run companies are good for our society, right? And they provide a good quality job, provide people their stability in their life. And so what's a hallmark of a well-run company is one that does well for the shareholders, has products or services people want to pay you for. And thirdly, it's where people want to work, where it's a great place to work for its employees. And so if you keep that in balance, you're a well-run company that's good for the whole community, right? But in our capitalist way of working here in the United States, there's always this time where there's the question of what comes first, the shareholders or the employees. And what I saw too many times, that employees came second, that short-term orientation of a business had to come first. It's the way the capital markets are set up. And so it always kind of bothered me. Although I did well in that environment, it bothered me that I thought there's got to be a different way about it. And so as being a corporate executive has a certain shelf life anyway. I was thinking what the next chapter was. To me, how is there a way to do business in a different way where more people can benefit in our society? So as I left my corporate job, a friend of mine was on the board of Salvation Army with me. I'm still on that board. He invited me to lunch at the Homegirl Cafe. I had never been down to Homeboy, didn't know much about it. Clearly, he wanted to get me involved at the board level. And so I'm having lunch at the Homegirl Cafe, and I'm looking at the folks who are working at the Homegirl Cafe, and I'm realizing that here's a group of folks who are working hard, they're engaging with the customer, they seem to be enjoying themselves, and so they got a good work ethic, and it's good. I'm also realizing I would have never hired any of those folks back in my corporate job because of their felony, because of their tattoos, because of their gang memberships. And here's this workforce that's actually doing pretty well. So when my friend asked me to get involved, I had time on my hands. I wanted to see if I could use my business skills to help people in a different way. And so I said yes, and I started as a volunteer, and from there I just fell in love with the organization.
Wow. That's awesome. So you took over from Father Greg Boyle as the first CEO of Homeboy. I know a little bit about Father Greg. He is a force. Mm-hmm. He is, his vision and the impact that he had on the organization were extraordinary. Can you talk to us about what it was like to take the reins from him and fill his shoes, so to speak, or maybe not fill his shoes and get your new pair of shoes to do things differently? Yeah,
even the way you asked the question makes me nervous. I don't think I ever took over for Father Greg, and I never want to say that for sure. But I understand the spirit of the question. Yeah. I wanted to come at it from a couple different angles. Okay, so I was an executive vice president of a $13 billion corporation with 200,000 employees, had a long-time chairman. Right? And so my job was to run my businesses and be on the executive team and then manage a long-time chairman. So somewhere in my corporate career, I learned to manage up as well as managing down and managing sideways, right? And so sort of had that skill set in mind. I came to Homeboy wanting to help the way I thought about it, I've already had a successful career. I just want to see how I can help. So I didn't come to Homeboy to kind of brandish my name or build a reputation for myself, right? So it was it's easy to live the notion of humble servant leadership, right?
Yeah.
Along the way. And then thirdly, Father Greg is a living saint. It's like, oh my gosh, just to be in his orbit is special. And all of us would do anything to sort of help make his life easier. So I always viewed my job was obviously not to replace him, right? Greg and the team really knew the mission well. They knew how to help men and women get out of gang life. On an organizational level, it was a little bit of a mess. Things were going wrong. That's why they brought Gail in to do the strategic planning, that type of thing. So, I come in with the skill set of knowing how to run organizations, how to get people in the right jobs and doing the right thing. And the other thing about it was Greg really didn't want to do any of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so he readily handed that over, right? And so, in all these years, it's been a great partnership, and it's still Greg's organization. It's not mine. But as if you're trying to model this into other organizations, there's this dynamic of all the folks who work at Homeboy, how do they see Greg and I, their partnership playing out? And so we worked really hard in making sure we were on the same page.
Okay.
But I'm not taking over for Father Greg.
So Gail mentioned this, and I also noticed in, seeing other talks that you've done, the importance of leaders getting out of the way. Can you talk about what that looks like for you to get out of the way, and maybe how it shapes how you spend your time and energy at Homeboy?
Yeah, is sort of, I want to kind of give the evolution of my time at Homeboy a little bit, and it makes it easier to think about that way. So when I started at Homeboy, it was struggling, and it's financially struggling in the sense, always doing a good job in the mission, helping a lot of people. I wanted to make sure I spent early part of my time, understanding what makes Homeboy successful, what's the secret sauce, right? And it's really thinking about, as you're going to grow an organization, and eventually you get to growing the leaders in the organization, you want to understand what the culture is. And Homeboy has a very strong culture. So in any organization, though, as you're trying to grow it, and we've tripled it, but if you're doubling it and tripling it, the key part is keeping your culture strong, and a key aspect of how you can successfully stay true to your mission while serving more and more people. Right? And so it became pretty clear early on to me that what keeps our culture strong is having from an organization standpoint, having a good blend of outside talent and inside talent coming in to do the mission, right? And in particular, as you how to help men and women get out of gang life, you need folks who've walked in those shoes. And so, early on, and right now we have 2/3 of our management team are former clients, right? And early on it was only about 1/3. And so, it was, in some ways it's low-hanging fruit to say it's obvious to sort of, you want more people in your management team who have lived experience, because they're the ones who are great mentors along the way. So it's easy to say that. The hard part is, how do you sort of develop the leadership team, not just the folks with lived experience, but outside experience, to grow in an organization? So we then had to put a lot of resources around management development, leadership development, and along the way, quote unquote, tool up that aspect of folks with lived experience who didn't work in other place, but never had a chance to learn those other school tools, but to bring those tools to them and let them learn. So now it's great. We have a lot of leaders from within. In our 8 social enterprise businesses, 90% of all the leaders are former clients. In the program side, again, it's about 60% are former clients along the way, and that's at all levels of the organization, all the way up to VP. And so it's my goal and Greg's goal is to someday, have Homeboys run Homeboy, right? And have it really be, that's how it's going to perpetuate in the future. Because at some point, unfortunately, Greg, I go away, obviously, but Greg goes away, and we need to keep that going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really powerful example of transformative leadership. I'd like to shift focus now to just dig into Homeboy a little more and the impact it's had on the community. Can you say a little bit about what success looks like at Homeboy?
Yeah, listen, so there's lots of ways of thinking about that. And one of the things I love about Homeboy is how it's sort of counter to conventional wisdom, how we talk about things. And, whatever view, we don't really try to say, are people successful or not? In fact, we don't have performance appraisals of our people, right? We don't judge them, right? And it's one of the things I've learned the most at being a Homeboy is trying, in the corporate world, you're always measuring people and stacking your sales team from top to bottom and doing all those things. But at Homeboy, we don't. It's about looking at the individual and doing what you need to do to help that person move their life forward, right? And so from a client perspective, that makes a lot of sense, right? It's like, how do you help them? Because all our clients are victims of complex trauma. And when they come out of the prison system, you got to help them heal from that trauma so they can become resilient to take on what society throws at them, right? And so then you think about, then you have a management team, right? And so if you're not judging your trainees, should you start judging your management team? And that doesn't really sync together. And so you have to come up with a different way of classically how you measure success is thinking about what do we do as an organization? And if you think about the business we're in is helping people transform their life, right? And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure we keep doing that. And among the things about the trainees we serve, the homies we serve, is that they're survivors, that they know when they're being helped and they know when they're not being helped. And so glibly we say, we know we're successful because people keep coming in every day looking for help. Because they're not court mandated, they're not forced to come to Homeboy. They voluntarily walk through our doors and say, please help me. I need a job. I need to move my life forward. So, even today, even this week, every week we interview folks, 15 people interview to be part of the Homeboy program. And this, the way the numbers work, we only take on 2. And so we're successful in the sense that people see us as a way of helping them move their life forward, and we stand for that. And so from that standpoint, we know we're helping people. We can see the trajectory of their life, and that's success. Foundation world, government world, asks us to measure it differently.
Yeah.
Right? They don't want to take on that more theoretical answer. And so we do sort of quantify the number of people coming to our program. We know there are behaviors that sort of have a high indication of likelihood of transformation, right? So it's family reunification, it's substance-free, it's housing stability, it's obviously not reincarceration. So as our folks are going along that path, we know they're more likely to succeed in that outside of world point of view. But healing's a lifelong effort, especially folks who've been victims of complex trauma.
Mm-hmm. Do you follow folks after they leave Homeboy?
We do. We need to do a better job of following them. It's not so easy, but we do.
Okay. So a big part of, you mentioned Homegirl Cafe, right? A big part of what Homeboy is able to do is related to the social enterprises. So can you tell us more about how the businesses are integrated with the model of healing? Yeah.
So look, a big part of we call work therapy. Why we still have businesses after all these years is because it's very important to what it takes for somebody to kind of stabilize their life and to heal going forward. And so this is sort of one of the big messages here. Having a job gives people stability and gives people a structure. And so for our clients, and in particular in our clients, 90% of our clients have never worked anywhere their whole life, right? And now they've hustled on the street, they've made money, they've gone to prison, all that stuff. But in terms of having the sort of the showing up every day and having that muscle memory of how to do work, they've never done that. And so in part, we have businesses to sort of teach them work skills. But more importantly, we have businesses because they need purposeful activity. And they need to learn how to, and in our environment, we talk about building positive relationships. And so part of the businesses are about learning work in a team, build that relationship. I mean, there's nothing better. Think about it. In LA County, there's over 200 different gangs in LA County, right? And there's nothing better than, in our bakery, we make artisan bread, hand rolled. So when 2 guys from rival gangs are rolling dough next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, and they know they got to get a certain amount of bread done that day, there's nothing better that breaks down those barriers, because as Father Greg's taught us, you can't demonize somebody you're in relationship with. And so being in a business situation, right, they know they got to get a certain amount of bread done. It breaks down those barriers. And once enemies, like real enemies, shooting at each other, enemies, people who killed each other's brothers, now are forming a relationship and forming a bond. So the business part of what we do is really important.
Yeah. Why do we need models like this? And why do people like us in this room need to support those models, either as business leaders or consumers or just members of the community? Yeah,
I want to answer that a couple ways as well. So, look, Homeboy helps. We have a very narrow view of who we help. We help former gang members, formerly incarcerated people, right? And nowhere else anywhere in the county that those folks get helped, right? And we deal with serious violent offenders, and we're able to help them transform their life. I'm going to give you a longer answer here. A number of years ago, UCLA did it independently in a study. Dr. Georgia Leap did a study about Homeboy, and it showed that folks who have been part of the Homeboy program 2 years later only have a 30% recidivism rate, meaning going back into the jail system under a new crime. And that 30% compares very favorably to the 70% that's the average of the statewide average. So we're over 2 times more effective in that sense, and we deal with serious violent offenders, right? And so we have a model that works, right? And we know it works. People keep showing up every day. We keep seeing lives being changed. So the spirit of your question, I want to say, the other thing I've kind of observed at Homeboy over time is that Homeboy's got a formula, how it approaches people. It doesn't demonize people. Our secret sauce is love and kinship. And we don't, when they walk through our door, we don't judge them by their color, their skin, the tattoos on their face, or the gang they were at. We're here to help them along the way. And so I want to say also this. So listen, the poverty rate in America has been the same for 45 years. In America, the poverty rate's been the same. 12%, 13% for 45 years. So as a society, we haven't figured out how to lift people out of poverty. Wealthiest nation on earth, wealthiest nation in the whole evolution of the earth. We still have 13% people in poverty, right? And so, but also what I see at Homeboy is here we have people not just in poverty that we're lifting them out. There are people who, there's like the lowest level of people in poverty. They're demonized, they've got felonies, society wants to lock them up and throw away the key. And Homeboy's got a way of helping people come out of that and transform their life. And so if Homeboy can do it, I think other organizations can do it. And it's sort of one of the things I think about in the business world. This gets back to the whole point of impact here, right? You can impact people's lives by giving them a quality job, right? Now, it doesn't have to be just to give a Homeboy a quality job, but give someone a quality job, which this is what your organization works on all the time. It's so livable wage, benefits, predictable scheduling, upward mobility is so important. It provides that structure. How do you get people out of poverty? They give them a good job. They get to get minimum wage, above minimum wage jobs, middle class. And what we've seen at Homeboy is as we bring people up from supervisor, manager, director to VP, they'll move their life forward. And so all businesses can have an impact. And so I like to kind of think about this. I'm trying to come up with a way of how do we challenge corporate America? How do we say to corporate America, look, as you think about hiring over the next year, take 15% of your hires and hire the working poor and give them a quality job. Because in a way, my thinking after all these years, and I'm an old guy, a business guy, right? I think businesses can make the biggest difference. I don't think it's about kind of, in part, it's government programs, but it's about, in the end, you need that structure of a job. And so how do we get this message out about impact, about hiring the right people, hiring the people that need the jobs and moving them forward in the right way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the message is getting out a little bit, right? Because Homeboy has this global network. I believe there's over 400 organizations in the network. What do you think makes it effective globally? Why is it compelling globally to have this model?
Yeah, I think it's effective. Like we have this global network. It comes from, a lot of people have visited Homeboy and walked through, and I invite everyone to come visit us at Homeboy for sure. And organizations come to learn what we're about. We're open source, we're willing to share, teach them our way. But to do the work we're doing with the populations we serve, a disenfranchised population, a homeless population, an affected teen population, it's got to come from within, and it's got to happen from that local environment. So we've never gone that way. Why the network's growing is because this is a worldwide problem of how do you help people who've been incarcerated? How do you help people who've been victims of complex trauma who have a hard time getting a job? How do you move the poor into that middle class? And so there's this need out there because in society of how do you create something that has impact. And other organizations take what we do and are doing a terrific job in their locations. I know REDF also has a network of folks you all help too. And so that's the point of getting the message out.
So how does the network work? How do the organizations relate to Homeboy?
Yeah, it's more about sharing best practices. Once a year we have a conference and global convening in August. And, about half the folks in the network come and visit us there. And what's good for us is we get to hear the problems in other places and how they innovate and solve that problem. And so it's about sharing best practice. But I also want to say, it's not, and this is the message I want to get across, it's not just nonprofits who help solve the problem, right? And so what I think is interesting over the last couple of years, while they may not be in our network, we've had for-profit companies come to our global convening. We have government agencies come to our global convening. That it's it's the mindset. How do you think about helping people? And it starts with thinking about what do you got to do for the individual and what resources you need to give them outside of not just their job, to get the job done, but help them in their life so they can be fully attentive during the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there some examples in the global network that you would highlight as organizations that have a similar model and are doing really good work in other places?
Sure, there's dozens and dozens of them. I mean, you think of every major city in the country, from San Diego to Chicago to Portland, even rural locations in Oklahoma, far in Belfast, Ireland, and Scotland, and so. But it's sort of what's part of your other question was about why do people want to do this type of effort? I think all of us know. Or we've grown up knowing that there's goodness in all people, and if you can just kind of lean into that will make a difference. If you trust somebody, that makes a difference. It's hard to do that in the business world sometimes because you got all these rules in place. But what we kind of do at Homeboy is kind of bust up those rules and just show you first lean in helping people in whatever fashion you can. And then when they take that message back to their local organizations, that's what makes a difference there. And so I just want to say that again for emphasis. It's about looking at and working with the individual, not worrying about setting precedent. Right? And so as we help a lot of people on a daily basis, and oftentimes they need money because it's tough to live out there. And so you may come in today and we need to help you out with $100 to pay your electric bill. Someone else may come in tomorrow with the same electrical problem, but we know more of their story, so we say, we're not going to help you for that. We'll loan you the money, we're not going to give you the money, or we'll do it a different way. And so it's about not worrying about setting precedents, helping the individual. And it's taking that philosophy back to other locations that's been worthwhile.
Yeah, there's like a balance of grace and accountability that constantly needs to be in the work. Absolutely. So we're at a business school. And you, of course, have a robust business background in business and leadership. For students who are here who see their career paths evolving to more directly focus on impact, what advice would you give them about when it makes sense to transition to an impact-related role? And maybe going back to some of your own decision-making in coming from the private sector to Homeboy.
Yeah, let me clearly say, and I've said this at Gail's class before, right? And So I've thought about this a lot because I feel so blessed, in many ways I feel blessed to sort of end my career doing this type of work. And I would often think about, should I have started my career doing this type of work? And I don't know how to answer that question in retrospect. It's like too much behind it, but I want to clearly say, if you're interested in running a social enterprise and working on a social enterprise, the key characteristic is you have to know how to make that business work in a for-profit model. Because you got to know the dynamics of a successful organization. How do you drive sales? How do you control costs? What are your product costs? What are your labor? And all those things. You got to know all that as to how to run a successful business. And then you can put your own social impact on. First of all, social impact, again, you've heard me say loud and clear. Making quality jobs available and hiring people who haven't had those chances, that has social impact. Then if you want to add extra social impact on top, whether it's more green-oriented work or not, you can do that, but you add that as that's the one or two things you do that's different from a for-profit company, that's the part of your mission. But for the most part, your organization is going to look 85% like a for-profit business. And so I want to be really clear that because we get a lot of people come to our global network and they think they want to start up a coffee shop or a bakery or electronic recycling company, and there's nothing wrong with how it sounds bad, but they send us a program officer that is really great at mental health counseling. Well, that person's not going to run the business more than likely. They could, and I'm not saying they don't have the ability, but it's not. You got to find people who run those businesses to help you move that business forward. So, message: any business that provides quality jobs is impact, and that's definitely worthwhile. And secondly, if you want to be in a more social enterprise effort, find people, know how to run it yourself, and make sure you stay true to those business principles.
Yeah, the impact doesn't exist unless the business can kind of facilitate
no margin, no mission.
That, right?
That's a famous line. Where are the nuns from Providence Healthcare or something like that say that? No margin, no mission.
Yeah, and earned revenue is always going to be far more flexible than any grant dollars you're getting or government funding you're getting, because to your point, the government wants to know what did you do with that money? Tell me the numbers, all of that. So absolutely. Okay, so there's others of us that are, maybe graduating business school and will spend our entire careers in the private sector, but want to bring that impact lens to work. So what lessons would you encourage those folks to take away from Homeboy's success, and maybe the seeds that you want to plant for them as they think about the role of business in society?
Yeah. You ever heard, the first one was great quality jobs. But the second one I want to say, this is something that, I grew up in the business world, and I was one of those folks. You can either be the one, you understand the rules and you live within the rules, or you understand the rules and you work to break up the rules and to change the dynamic. I was one of those, tell me the rules, I'm going to succeed within them, right? So I said that as a preface to say, in the business world, it's hard to talk, you don't really talk about your faith and your own spirituality. What I've loved being at Homeboy is going on further into my faith journey, my own spiritual journey. And one could think I can learn that from Father Greg without a doubt, but I learned that from our trainees, from our homies, homeboys and homegirls themselves. Because what really changes their life forward is for them to understand that they get to start loving themselves. And they can't love their family, they can't sort of do what we all want them to do without them loving themselves first. They don't love themselves until they realize God loves them no matter what, right? And so to me, it's gaining that understanding from observation and dialogue and in deep dialogue with our folks, and then combining that with understanding that once you love yourself and know you're loved, what's the best way to find joy is through others, right? And so joy is foundational to a thriving workplace. And so as you think about in your corporate jobs, I know it sounds hard to do. I've been there and done all that as well. It's about finding joy through others. So oftentimes, like midway through my Homeboy time, super stressed, we're always running out of money because we're trying to help so many people. And I kind of had this sort of thought about everything that I was working on. It was like in this prism of, did we get enough money? Did my friend donate enough money? Did these people do all that we needed? And it was becoming unhealthy. And I had this dialogue with Greg over a couple-week time span. And the way he talked to me about, it's about finding joy, and it's finding joy through others. And it's a mindset. And if my job needs to be about finding joy through others, not about getting enough money for Homeboy. And once I learned that, hey, that's really, it is the goal, finding joy through others and experiencing and opening yourself up to those moments of grace, that's what makes the job motivating and moving forward, and all the other stuff falls into place. And so I wish I had known as a younger man, it was not about myself and my career, my family. Now, without that, we worked as a team, we succeeded as a team, but it's actually finding that joy through others that really sort of creates a great balance. And so that's my advice to you all.
Thanks, Tom. Shall we do some audience questions?
It's quiet enough in here. So you mentioned that you typically get requests from individuals.
Is this working now?
During the week, about 15 individuals, and you can only take care of 2. What prevents you from taking care of the individuals that are left, 13? Is it lack of resources on your part, or is it that you find that maybe they really aren't that serious? I mean, because I would tend to think that it would take some amount of courage to even walk into the doors of Homeboy and ask for help.
Yeah, that's a good way of framing that up. And right, it's lack of resources. We don't have enough money to. And any one day we have 400 clients that we serve. They're on our payroll. We pay them to help them heal. They're doing a little bit of work in our businesses, but more so they're going to their counselor, their therapist, their GED class, all that stuff, right? And so, in addition to that 400 that we have our payroll, another 300 are community clients we come in and take care of as well. Tattoo removal, anger management classes, NAAA type of classes. But in those 15, they're interviewing to be part of our paid program, because while someone can come in and take advantage of our classes for free, most of their day they need enough money for food and shelter, so they're not really going to come every day on a free basis. They really need to be part of our paid program. I do also want to say, of those 12, 15 come in, hire 2 to 3. We 12 to 13, we say come for a free program, but we can't help you. Breaks our heart. We have to turn them away, because you're right, because when they walk through the door, they really do need help along the way. And so for a business guy, what drives me forward is, hey, how do I find more resources so we don't have to turn so many people away? The other really unique thing about Homeboy is we reverse cherry pick. So of those 15, we interview them. We take the hardest of the hard cases, the least likely to succeed, which goes back to this success question. So when foundations ask us what's the percentage of people come through your program, if we were driven by that measure of success, we would take the people most likely to succeed in our program to make sure we got good numbers at the end to make that work. But from Father Gray's philosophy, from day one, take the one who needs us the most, and that's who we're going to help along the way. And that's what we stand by.
Hi, thank you for all that. My question is about some advice that you would have for people like us, like business school students. If we want to work just like Homeboy with underprivileged, like people from underprivileged background, what would be your advice to try to know the community better and understand how to interact with them? Because that's probably, you have Father Greg for that, who's amazing with people, but as business school students, it's kind of a blocker to interact with those communities. So what would be advice for us?
Yeah, no, that's another good question. So let me say this, I want to come around the bend on this one. Even if you work in the corporate world, and this is the spirit of your question, you can still spend your volunteer hours helping people who are disenfranchised, right, and underprivileged. And so the question is how to do it. So first of all, let me say, I think everyone should try to do this. Everyone should work to do this. And Greg talks about that we as a society need to move ourselves to who are people on the margins and have positive relationships with people on the margins of our society. It's about having a relationship. It's not about going and fixing people on the margins. And what helps people on the margins of our society transform, thrive, is having positive relationships. And so as easy it is to say, it's about just sitting in community with people, just sitting down in a chair and talking to people. It's the hardest thing for humans to do because you think you have nothing in common with them. And why would they want to listen to me? What do they want to say? And all those things. But I'm telling you, I have that same nerve. I always have those same nerves too. At Homeboy, what we do is when volunteers come in, I think a lot of people come in and want to sort of, I want to be a tutor, I want to teach financial literacy, okay. It's what they all want to do. We say, come in, be part of our community, and you'll find your way. Sounds nice to say, cute to say, but it really works. We just say, we're not going to give you any responsibility as a volunteer. Just sit around and start talking to people. And that's it's not just symbolism there, it's an important lesson that it's about moving ourselves and our own insecurities and just being with somebody and talking about it. And that makes a huge difference. And so find organizations where you can just hang out. You know, as a business guy, I first come into Homeboy, I'm thinking, all these people hanging out, people kind of laughing all the time. I'm thinking, aren't they taking it seriously? Don't they got to get to work? But really, it's about forming that community, and that's what makes the whole thing work.
I would just add to that, REDF has a Farber Fellowship that is specifically for MBA students, and we see that those who are most successful are those who show up to the social enterprise they're working at for the summer and just spend some time listening, chatting, understanding, and then start to say, okay, here's where I can help. What, have you considered this? And just engaging in dialogue.
Yeah, like as just one example, one recent example. So we have a fellow who's a West Point graduate, finishing his last 5 years in the Army. The last 3 months in his 5 years, captain in the Army. He was in one of the Eastern European countries, sort of leading troops. He wanted to come to Homeboy and kind of do a whole bunch of things. And we said, no, come to Homeboy, but we're not going to assign you anything for the first 3 or 4 weeks. And he did a really good job of just kind of talking to people and being humble. Oh my gosh, so many people keep coming up to him now, asking him to do this, asking him to do that. And it's like you find your way. But the first step is to kind of be humble, feel like you don't have to wag your finger at people and tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good question about here. Hey, sir, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Really interested in kind of your discussion on your framework of success and specifically helping them transition, your homeboys and homies, your homies and homegirls transition into a new life. So just kind of curious, what's been the biggest hurdle for them as far as that successful transfer? And if you had unlimited funds, what would you implement to kind of overcome that biggest hurdle?
Listen, so the work we do, people are part of our program for 18 months, right? And so they come to Homeboy whether they're, whether they're 24 years old or 44 years old, right? It's a lifetime of incarceration, lifetime of trauma, complex trauma on themselves, perpetuating trauma. And so while the with us for 18 months, which is very long for any other program out there, a government program only pays for like 3 months or something, right? We can't fully, they're not going to fully be healed after 18 months. And so healing is a lifelong endeavor. So we try to get them resilient enough to take on what society throws at them. And so, in part, after they're with us for 18 months and we get them a job outside of Homeboy, we know we got to keep touching with them, touching base with them, because there's always going to be falling backwards, right? And so, a little bit you think about this, in the sobriety world, people go and try to be clean. It takes 12 times to go to a clinic on average, before you actually stay sober the rest of your life. It's a little bit the same in the gang world as well. So we know people fall backwards. People don't go through our program in a direct line. And so it's knowing that we need to be with them longer for 18 months. So to your question, if we had unlimited money, we would probably hold people a longer bit of time, But the other thing that causes people's struggles after they leave Homeboy is that they're only getting a minimum wage job. You can't live in LA County on a minimum wage salary. And so just think about it. If you're always struggling for money, that creates all sorts of problems in your life. And if you have all this other trauma in your life coming at you, and you still have your homies coming at you saying, hey, you can make money really quickly if you just come with me this weekend. It's an ongoing struggle. And so what we're trying to do with our social enterprise businesses, the few we've had, like the next couple, the Homeboy Recycling and the next couple we're doing, is to pay more market-based wages so that people have that quality job and that we can hold them for a longer period of time.
Okay. Oh, you have a question? 2 more questions.
Thanks. Hi there. Can you tell us more about Homeboy Threads and the catalyst behind it?
Yeah, I smile because it's pretty interesting. I'm still a naysayer. I shouldn't say that publicly. Okay, I'm an old man. I'm an old business guy. So here, Homeboy Threads. It's our latest business. Homeboy Electronic Recycling. We have Homeboy Recycling business. You know, it's been a really good business for us. Everybody's got to, in the state of California, properly dispose of your electronics, your phones, your computers. And so we've created this business where we pick up people's electronic waste, bring it back to our location, demanufacture, sell its components, and or repurpose the machine and resell it elsewhere. We acquired that business. It was about $300,000 in annual sales. There's now, this past year we did $3 million in sales. So it keeps growing. What's interesting is a number of big label brands have come to us and say, hey, can you do this with apparel? And can we pay you to do this with apparel? And so we've been going at it, and they've been fun. You know, so right now we have a really nice partnership with Guess, the Guess brand, Guess Jeans brand. And so we've created this Homeboy Threads new business. Now, not that I'm a doubter, I'm just kind of wondering how, what is the long-term marketplace for what they call upscaling apparel? Did I get that right? Upscaling, right. Again, I'm an old guy, maybe I don't want new clothes or something, I don't know. As a guy who's been in the laundry business from my Airmark days, I get the issue of apparel. But it is really interesting. Our folks like working in that environment. We hope it really lands, and it could be another really high growth business for us that we can employ a lot more people.
All right, last question, full circle, giving it back to Professor North.
Thank you. What a great conversation. I didn't in the bio go into all of the kind of things you have cooking at Homeboy. Happen to have inside scoop that you've got a new strategic plan that will be adopted soon. Can you just take a minute and talk about kind of looking forward things like the venture fund, like expansion of the campus, capital comprehensive campaign, just what's on the horizon for Homeboy?
Yeah, look, we want to, again, double in impact, again, over the next couple of years, right? And to do that, we got some sort of sub-strategic initiatives to that. About 3 years ago now, pandemic messes up my timeline, we started the Homeboy Youth Reentry Center. And so think about this. So we started the first, now only, youth reentry center in the county of Los Angeles. And so when youth go to youth camp, youth jail, when they get out of youth camp, youth jail, we have a spot for them to come to so that they don't have to go back running with the gang. So we want to expand youth programming. Right? We also have Homeboy Art Academy, and it's not just about teaching people art, but it's expressing themselves through the arts and leadership development through the arts. So we have a desire for that to grow. Back on the business side, back to my Airmark days, my last 8 years there, in my business, made 40 acquisitions in those 8 years. And so I see the economic model of how you acquire a business and how if you invest in that business, how it grows and creates more jobs. What's interesting in the for-profit model, particularly backed by private equity, when you acquire a business, you need an internal return on investment of whatever, 15 to 18 to 20%, right? So back in my old days there, we passed up a lot of businesses that had like a 9% return on investment. And so, a number of years ago, I started thinking, well, wait a minute, if Homeboy can find the capital to buy businesses and maybe only return 3% return on investment, I know we can grow those businesses and create a lot more quality jobs. And so to me, the measurement there is how many jobs you create in that business, not so much what you return to shareholders. So that was the idea behind creating a Homeboy Venture and Jobs Fund, which our goal was to raise $15 million. We've raised 12 of that $15 million. And what we're looking to do is to deploy that money to create or buy Homeboy type businesses as we go forward. And so Threads, Homeboy Threads is one of those businesses. There's a big push in electric vehicles, EV charging stations. We're working with a potential business to become the organization that services those charging stations along the way. So that's a business opportunity. And so that's sort of more fancier ones, but less fancy business opportunities are working on, it's amazing, there's a shortage of pet groomers. And so creating a pet grooming academy, right? There's also a shortage of dog trainers. And so we're working on training. So it's like anything, any business that needs people, we want to be involved in, and we can create those jobs. So it's growing the business side. And of course, we want to keep growing our campus. One of the things we don't provide is housing. And so we're working really hard to try to get transitional housing built right next to our city lot. We're working with the city to deed over the properties. It's taken a long time to make that happen, but we think we're close to getting over the finish line. So I think our future is bright for all these types of initiatives that we keep going. But without a doubt, I don't want to lose the message. What we're here, though, is to help people transform their life and to heal from their trauma. And that's always going to be center to what all these other initiatives are working around.